In this video, I'm going to cover the effects of changes in policies and economic conditions on the foreign exchange market. So what are the different factors that will shift the foreign exchange market? A change in taste. What would happen to the value of the dollar and the pound if British tourists flocked to the US? The demand for US dollars is going to increase and the supply of British pounds is going to increase. So the pound would depreciate while the dollar would appreciate. The second thing that can change or cause shifts in the foreign exchange market are changes in relative incomes. So what would happen to the value of the dollar and the pound if incomes in the US go up? The US would buy more imports, so the demand for pounds would increase and the supply of dollars would increase. So the pound would appreciate and the dollar would depreciate. Number 3, changes in relative price level. What's going to happen to the value of the dollar and pound if US inflation rises relative to Britain? Americans would want cheaper imports, so the demand for pounds would increase. The supply of US dollars would go up, so the pound would appreciate while the dollar would depreciate. And the fourth shifter are changes in relative interest rates. So what would happen to the value of dollars and pounds if the US interest rate increases relative to what interest rates are in Britain? British people would want to invest their money in financial institutions in the US to earn that higher interest rate. So the British demand for US dollars would increase. British would supply more pounds, so the pound would depreciate while the American dollar would appreciate. Changes in price level and changes in interest rate will cause both the demand and the supply to shift at the same time. On the AP exam, they're usually only going to ask you about demand or supply, but it's important to know that both curves can actually shift. What will happen to the international value of the Mexican peso if there's high inflation in Mexico? The demand for pesos is going to decrease since Mexico's trading partners are not going to want to buy the higher priced Mexican product. So pesos are going to depreciate. The supply is going to increase as Mexicans look to buy lower priced imports. What will happen to the international value of the Mexican peso if the interest rate in Mexico falls? In this case, the demand for pesos is going to fall since people in other countries will buy fewer financial assets in Mexico. So the supply of pesos is going to increase as investors move their assets to other countries. So in this case, the peso would depreciate. What could the government do if it wanted to decrease the number of imports coming into a country? They could impose tariffs, which a tariff is specifically a tax on imports. They could impose a quota, which limits the quantity of imports. Each of these will decrease the supply of currency, restricting trade since fewer transactions are actually taking place. For each of the following examples, identify what will happen to the value of the dollar and the Japanese yen. Here is a chart with the answers. The shifter, the value of the dollar, whether it appreciates or depreciates, as well as the value of the yen. Note that scenarios 1, 2, and 4 will increase U.S. exports because U.S. products are now relatively cheaper. And here's a practice question, and the answer is B. And another practice question, and the answer is A. And one more, and the answer is B. A fixed exchange rate refers to the government actively managing the country's currency. And a floating exchange rate refers to the market determining the value of the country's currency. Some governments will attempt to depreciate their country's currency in order to promote exports. Here's another practice question, and the answer is B. And another one, and the answer is E. And finally, a practice FRQ with the answers.